Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a man gets a job working for a bookstore when he realizes the books aren't the only things holding secrets. So when you get this book series, make sure it's first edition.
You ever take a job just because it feels easy? That's what this was supposed to be. A little breather from my usual chaos. A quiet bookstore in a seaside town I'd never heard of. Acheron Books. The name alone should have been a warning sign. But when rent's overdue and your blog's bringing in less than a Twitch streamer's cat, you don't get picky. The email came out of nowhere. No website, no LinkedIn page. Just a simple message. Mr. Rourke, we believe your skills align perfectly with our needs. Acheron Books, Crescent Bay, lodging included. Signed, SG. Normally that kind of thing would raise every red flag I've got. But something about it, I don't know, it felt like fate. Or maybe I was just desperate enough to romanticize being recruited by a creepy-ass bookstore. So I went. Crescent Bay was exactly the kind of sleepy coastal town you forget exists. Salt in the air. No cell service once you pass the cliffs. Locals with stares that last too long. And right on Main Street, wedged between a florist and an abandoned apothecary, was Acheron Books. Looked normal enough. Old wood, big windows. Gold-lettered sign. That smell, dust and stories, and maybe a little mildew. I walked in expecting someone to greet me. No bell, no staff, just shelves. And silence. Until she appeared. Tall, silver hair, skin like paper. This woman in a blue velvet dress. She didn't walk up. She just was there. Said her name was Sylvia. No last name. Just Sylvia. She looked at me for a long time. Eyes like dried ink, and said, "You're a little later than expected." I said, "I wasn't given a time." She smiled. "We're always waiting for someone." Not creepy at all. She gave me a tour, told me where things went. Hardcovers in alphabetical order. First editions in the glass case. The special inventory in the basement. And when I asked what that meant, she just said, "You'll know it when you see it." The job was fine at first. Quiet. Almost peaceful. But it didn't take long before I started noticing things. Little things. Books with no titles. Customers who never spoke. Just pointed to a shelf and walked out with a book I swore wasn't there a second earlier. And then there was the register. Old school, manual, no computer. But when I tried to open the drawer, it hissed. Actually hissed. Like something alive didn't want to be disturbed. I let that one go. Figured maybe the drawer was jammed or something. Denial's a hell of a drug. I stayed in a small apartment above the shop. Pretty basic, bed, desk, kitchenette. But the walls were off. Not in a bad paint job way. More like they were breathing. I'd wake up at night and hear scratching inside them, whispering, like mice, but with words I couldn't quite catch, just enough to make your skin crawl. On the third day, I found the door to the basement unlocked. Sylvia had said it was restricted, but the lock was just gone. No sign of it ever being there. Of course, I went down. That's where things really started. The stairs led into this wide, low-ceilinged room with rows of shelves, even older than the ones upstairs. No electric lights, just candles, all of them already lit. The air was thicker down there, warmer. And the books? They weren't like normal books. Some were wrapped in chains, others sealed with wax or hair, or something that looked like skin but wasn't. And in the very back, behind a rusted gate, I saw a desk, old oak, covered in dust. On it sat one book. No title, no author, no markings at all, except for a black ribbon tied around it. I picked it up. It was warm, and then I noticed it was bleeding. Tiny drops of red seeping through the ribbon, staining the cover. I set it down and turned to leave, but something caught my eye. On the wall beside the desk, there were hundreds of names carved into the wood. No dates, no context, just names. Most I didn't recognize. One I did, mine. Caleb Rourke, carved in perfect cursive. I stumbled back so fast I nearly tripped over a broken floorboard. That's when I saw the second book. Smaller, open-faced, sitting just beneath the desk. Unlike the others, this one had writing. In red ink. No, scratch that. Not ink. Blood. The words were handwritten, and they described me. My job history, my blog, my failed engagement. Even the panic attack I had on the subway last fall, that I never told anyone about. And at the bottom of the page, to be bound. I slammed the book shut, ran upstairs. The store was empty, lights off. But when I checked the front door, it was locked from the inside. I turned around and nearly screamed. Sylvia was standing there again. Just there. She tilted her head and said, "Found the ledger, didn't you?" I asked her what the hell this place was, what that book meant. She said, "We are curators, Caleb. Guardians of the written soul. Every person's life is a story. We simply make sure the ending is correct." I told her to go to hell. She smiled. "I've already been." Then she handed me a key. "Sleep well tonight. Tomorrow you'll begin training for the archive." I took the key, mostly because I didn't know what else to do. Back upstairs, I locked every door and window, checked behind the curtains, under the bed, tried calling anyone. No signal, no bars. My phone had no service, no GPS, no clock. It was just a blank screen. I don't even remember falling asleep. But I woke up at exactly 3:03 a.m. because something was in the room. Not a person, a sound, whispers, chanting, coming from inside the closet. I got up slow, heart pounding, opened the door. Nothing inside but clothes and books. Except one of the books wasn't booked. Same kind of covers, the ones in the basement, wrapped in a ribbon, bleeding. And tucked inside was a note, no handwriting, just printed block letters. "Do not open this. If you do, you join us." I burned the book in the kitchen sink, or at least I tried to. The fire caught, but the book didn't burn. Just screamed. Screamed, like a person being lit on fire. I dumped water on it. The screaming stopped. But the book was still there. Unburnt, still bleeding, still warm. That's when I noticed the ribbon had unraveled on its own, and the cover was starting to open. So I threw it in the freezer. Yeah, the freezer. Because honestly, that was the only thing I could think of. That's where it is right now, sitting next to a bag of peas and some old takeout. And I think it's waiting for me to open it, to read it, to finish the story. But I've seen what happens when you finish a story in that place. You don't walk away, you get shelved, and someone else gets hired. I don't know how long I have, but I found something else just before I started recording this. Behind a loose panel in the apartment floor, another book. This one, older, much older, with only 3 words on the first page. He tried escaping. The next page is blank, but something tells me it won't be for long. You ever try to pretend something didn't happen? Like, if you ignore it long enough, it'll just disappear? Yeah, that was me after the freezer incident. I left the book in there, didn't touch it, didn't look at it. I even started leaving the apartment as soon as the sun came up. Just walked the town until dark. Crescent Bay's not big. You can walk the whole place in maybe 40 minutes. But something about the town's layout started to mess with me. Streets looped back where they shouldn't. Buildings moved. I know how that sounds, but I swear, one day the antique shop was on 3rd. The next, it was gone. Just vanished. Locals acted like everything was normal. Even when I asked straight up, "Hey, wasn't there a shop here yesterday?" They'd smile and say, "No, you're thinking of another street." But the streets never changed. I was just losing track, or something was making sure I did. Still, I kept showing up at Akron Books. Part of me figured if I played along, I'd get answers, or a way out. Sylvia was always there in the mornings, already behind the desk, already watching. She didn't say much anymore. Just handed me a list of tasks, nodded, and returned to whatever cryptic tome she was studying. My main job? Inventory. Specifically, the special stock. I asked what that meant, and she said, the books that can't be cataloged digitally, they write themselves. She wasn't kidding. Every day I'd find books with different titles, even though they hadn't moved from the shelf. One day it'd say, The Widow in the Well, and the next it'd be Beneath Her Nails. Same binding, same place, different content. And I'm not talking metaphorically. I checked the pages. Words changed. Whole chapters rewrote themselves. I told myself it was some kind of projection, augmented reality, a prank. But deep down, I knew better. This place was wrong. Then I found the journal. It was buried under a pile of discarded volumes in the back room. Leather-bound, cracked and dry. Inside was a name, Hollis Greed. He was a former clerk, just like me. Worked here in the 80s, apparently. Each entry got worse. Started with the same stuff I'd been seeing. Weird books, shifting shelves, creepy customers. Then, around page 30, he wrote, I sold a book to a man in a gray coat. He didn't speak, just handed me a slip of paper with the title, The Last Fire. I found it, gave it to him. He smiled, walked out. That night, I had a dream. He was burning alive, screaming the whole time, but not in pain, in ecstasy. Next entry, man in gray coat found dead in his home, gas fire, whole place torched. Only thing untouched? The book. It kept going like that. Names, deaths, books. Each one somehow linked. Each one supposedly requested. That's when I noticed the pattern. The book titles. Each one matched an actual event. Murders, disappearances, accidents. I started cross-referencing them with the news stories from back then. And every damn time, it lined up. A book went out. Someone died. And guess what? A few days ago, I sold a book. A young woman came in, early 30s, asked if we had The Hollowed Tongue. It wasn't on the list, but as soon as I checked the back shelf, there it was. Just sitting there, like it had been waiting. I handed it to her. She smiled and said, Thanks. I've been waiting my whole life to find this. She left. I tried to shrug it off, until I saw her face on the news. Well, news is a strong word. More like a back-page obituary in the town paper. Barely a paragraph. Found dead in her tub. Tongue torn out. No signs of forced entry. The police called it a tragic accident. But I knew better. That's when the ledger came back into play. I hadn't gone near the basement since my name appeared in that cursed book. But after reading Hollis's journal, I had to go back. I waited until after close. The lock was back on the basement door, but the key Sylvia gave me on my first day, it worked. Downstairs, nothing had changed. Same shelves, same smell, mildew, and something metallic. But this time, I knew where to look. Behind the desk, behind the gate, the carved wall of names, and there, next to mine, were 3 new ones. I recognized the woman's, and the man in the gray coat. The third one was unfamiliar. Lorelei Finch. I didn't know it yet, but I'd meet her soon. I flipped open the smaller book, the blood-written ledger, and nearly dropped it. My page had more text now. A paragraph describing me reading Hollis's journal. It even mentioned the line about the man in the coat catching fire. It was writing what I had just done, like it had been waiting for me to do it. But then, I saw something else. Beneath that entry, in darker red, almost black, was a date. Tomorrow. Next to it, one word. Rebinding. I don't know what that means. Not exactly. But I have a bad feeling it isn't some team-building exercise. I tried to confront Sylvia. Told her I knew about the deaths, the books, the ledger. She just looked at me like I was a child throwing a tantrum. We don't kill, she said. We translate. She told me Acheron Books was a conduit, a sacred place where the stories of fates are bound and fulfilled. Most people live unremarkable lives, she said. We help make them significant. I asked her why mine was in the ledger. She smiled. Because you have a part to play. That night, I tried to leave town, just packed a bag, and drove west. But the roads didn't make sense. GPS failed 5 minutes in. Then the same gas station showed up 3 times in a row, even though I never turned around. And every time I passed it, The clerk inside just stood at the window, watching me, not moving, not blinking. I turned back, or I think I did. I don't remember driving back. Just waking up in my apartment, clothes still on, dirt on my shoes, mud on my hands, and a book on my pillow. No title. But this time, the first page was filled out. Caleb Rourke. To be bound. The letters were moving, like ink being written in real time. I blinked, and one word shifted. It said, "Tonight." I was about to throw the book across the room when the lights flickered, and the scratching started again. Not from the walls this time, from inside the mattress. I jumped back, pulled the sheets away. Nothing, until I cut open the bottom of the mattress with my pocket knife. And out fell another book, soaked, heavy. It landed with a wet slap. The same book I burned, the one I froze. It was back, and it had new pages, filled with scenes I haven't lived yet. One of them was me, standing in the basement surrounded by candles, a knife in my hand. Sylvia in front of me smiling, and a voice saying, "We are the words! You are the ink!" Then someone knocked on the door. 3 times, slow. I grabbed the knife and opened it, and there she was, Lorelei Finch, the third name from the wall. Pale, tired, eyes like cracked glass. She looked at me and said, "I escaped once, you can too, but you have to listen very carefully." I was still trying to process when she pushed past me, locked the door behind her, and whispered, "They know we're talking. We don't have much time." I didn't know whether to trust Lorelei Finch the last time someone showed up unannounced at my door. There was a book bleeding through my freezer. But there she was, alive, talking, and terrified. Pale skin, dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in weeks, or maybe years. She told me to sit. I didn't argue. She pulled a folded sheet of parchment from inside her jacket, the kind that looks like it was ripped from an ancient Bible, and across it, written in smeared ink or blood, was a symbol, a spiral of thorns, coiling inward. "I used to work at Acheron too," she said. 15 years ago, same position you're in now. They called me an archivist." I asked how she got out. She laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. "I didn't. Not completely. The store's still in me. Once it writes your name down, it owns you, but I figured out how to slow the ink." She said there was a way to fight the binding, but you had to understand the source. So she started talking. According to her, Acheron wasn't just a bookstore. It was a gate, a tether between worlds. The books, they weren't just stories. They were seals, each one tied to a soul, a life, a fate. And the cult, the curators, they don't just run the store, they feed it. Every time someone reads one of the cursed books, the story inside becomes real, and the soul linked to that story, gone, bound to the shelves, forever. I asked her why the hell anyone would willingly take one of these books. She said, "Because it gives you exactly what you want, until it doesn't." People come in searching for something, power, revenge, closure, and the books give it to them, but always with a price, always with blood. Then she leaned in close. "There's a ritual, one the cult performs during the solstice, a rewriting. That's when they fully bind the new archivist." I asked her what that meant. She didn't answer, just looked at me with the kind of pity I didn't want to see. Then she pulled out another book, small, leather-bound, no title. "This was mine," she said. I opened it, and the first page read, "Lorelei Finch. Status lost. Pending return." Beneath it, the word rebinding. Same word that had appeared in mine. She said the books were connected, that if we could swap names, transfer the binding, we could both be free. But to do that, we needed the original manuscript, the Codex Umbra. It was locked in the deepest part of the basement, the part even Sylvia never entered. "You'll know it when you see it," Lorelei said. "It's the only book that bleeds black." She handed me a key, ornate, cold. It hummed when I touched it. "You'll have one chance," she said. "They're planning your binding tomorrow night." I asked why she was helping me. Her voice cracked when she said, "Because the last archivist didn't make it. and I'm tired of watching this place eat people." She left through the fire escape, didn't say goodbye, just vanished into the fog. That night, I didn't sleep. I waited until 3:03 a.m., like always, when the store went silent and the air went still. Then I went downstairs. The normal basement looked the same, but behind one of the bookshelves, an entire wall slid open when I touched the key to the stone. It revealed a narrow staircase that spiraled down like a screw drilling into the earth. There were no lights, just the soft flicker of candles that lit themselves as I passed. The walls here weren't made of stone or brick. They were made of books, thousands of them, melted together, fused like bone. The deeper I went, the louder the whispering became. Except it wasn't whispering, it was reading. Voices reciting passages from all the cursed books, layered on top of each other like 1,000 stories screaming for space. And then I found it, a pedestal of black iron. On it, a single book, bound in something that looked like leather, but breathed when I got close. And it bled. Not red, but black. Thick, oil-slick blood that dripped to the floor and vanished before it landed. The Codex Umbra. I reached out. The moment I touched it, everything changed. I was somewhere else. Standing in the store, but it was twisted, rotting. The shelves were stacked with human bones. The floor writhed like muscle. And Sylvia stood at the register, but it wasn't her anymore. Her eyes were hollow, mouth sewn shut, and yet her voice was everywhere. "You've gone too far, Caleb." Behind her, a dozen curators stood in silence, faces covered, hands outstretched, each one holding a pen, dripping black ink. "You could have been a great archivist," she said, "but now you'll be nothing but margin notes." I backed away, clutching the codex. The world around me buckled. The shelves exploded into ash. The books screamed, and I snapped back into the basement, covered in blood. Not mine. Not yet, anyway. I ran all the way back to my apartment, locked every door, smashed my phone because something inside it had started talking. And then I waited until sunrise. I was going to burn the codex, but Lorelei came back before I could. She looked worse than before, flickering at the edges like she wasn't fully here. She saw the codex and smiled for the first time. "Now we can do it," she said. "We can break the bindings." She laid out the ritual. We each had to write our names in each other's books, then read from the codex, out loud, together. Simple, right? So we did it. She wrote Lorelei Finch in mine. I wrote Caleb Rourke in hers. Then we opened the codex. The words inside weren't in English or any language I knew, but we read them anyway. Sounded them out like phonetics, and something hurt us. The apartment went dark. The walls started dripping. Not water, ink. Thick black ink pouring from every crack. The books on my shelves caught fire without burning. And then Lorelei screamed. Not because she was hurt, because she was being pulled. Her body was unraveling, her skin peeling off in long strips of parchment, her voice flattening into ink. I tried to stop it, tried to break the book, but it snapped shut and sliced my hand open. I fell back, bleeding, shaking, and watched as Lorelei Finch, what was left of her, was pulled into the pages. Gone. Her book hit the floor, closed, and across the cover, freshly embossed, were the words, "Rebinding successful." Except it wasn't her name anymore. It was mine. Caleb Rourke. I picked it up, opened to the first page. It read, "Bound by deception, freed by ink, Caleb Rourke has taken the place willingly." That's when I heard the door creak. Sylvia, standing in the frame, smiling. "You performed the ritual," she said. "Clever boy." I asked her what the hell just happened. She said, "You escaped your book by entering someone else's. You broke your binding by stealing hers." I didn't mean to, I swear, I didn't, but she just nodded. That's how the story goes. One escapes, one is bound. Balance must be kept. I told her I wanted out. She laughed. "You're already out," she said. "You're not the archivist anymore." I didn't understand, until I turned around and saw me, standing in the corner, eyes wide, mouth open, pages spilling from my throat. It was Lorelei, wearing my face, my name, my story. She had tricked me, swapped places, used me. Sylvia clapped slowly. The binding room always finds a new voice. I looked down, and the codex was gone. Only my original book remained. Blank now, except for one. The final story begins at midnight. I didn't sleep. How could I? After watching Lorelei Finch wear my face, steal my name, and walk out into the world like she'd always owned it. And Sylvia, she let it happen, encouraged it. Because that's how the binding room works. One leaves, one stays. A story for a story. I spent the next few hours tearing my apartment apart. Every book, every scrap of paper, anything that might hold a sentence with my name on it, I burned it. But it didn't matter, because the story was already written, and I was the ink. At 11:59 p.m., the book began to hum. My book, still on the floor, bound in leather that now pulsed like a heartbeat. I opened it, and across the page, one sentence bled into view: "Return to Akron." And just like that, I knew I didn't have a choice. The store was calling me back, not for work, not even for punishment, but for closure. Because whatever Lorelei started, I had to end. So I went, back through the fog, back through the alley that should have led to a dead end, but didn't. Akron was open, lights on, empty, too quiet. No Sylvia at the front desk, no customers browsing shelves. Just silent. I stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind me, locked. The overhead lights flickered off, replaced by candlelight that bloomed in perfect rows along the shelves. And then, books started opening on their own, one after another, pages fluttering like wings, and from them, figures began to emerge. Pale, ink-stained shapes crawling out of stories like moths from a cocoon. Hundreds of them, all of them staring at me, their mouths sewn shut with thread, their eyes blank, and then they parted, made a path. And at the end of it, Lorelei, still wearing my face, but now dressed in all black, her skin smooth and her eyes my own. She clapped slowly as I walked forward. "You came," she said. "Of course you did." I asked her why. Why go through all of this? Why lie? Why trade places? She smiled like I was a child asking why fire burned. "Because I remembered," she said. "I remembered what it felt like to exist, and I wasn't going back to the margins." She circled me. "Do you know what happens to the ones who stay bound too long, Caleb? They fade. The story forgets them, and they become part of the shelves." She gestured to the walls. I looked, really looked. The wood of the bookshelves, it was bone, stacked vertebrae, spines, rib cages curled into shapes like furniture. The store wasn't made of brick and mortar. It was made of people, of stories too long forgotten. She kept talking. "There's a loophole in the codex, a way out if someone willingly takes your place. The story allows it, and you were perfect." I wanted to hit her, scream, but I didn't, because I finally understood something. She wasn't the villain. Not entirely. She was just a victim who got there first. I asked her what came next. She grinned. "The final rewrite," she said. "The binding ritual. You'll be sealed into the store forever. Your ink added to the codex. One last chapter." And that's when the curators appeared. 12 of them, cloaked in shadow. Their hoods blank where faces should be. They carried the tools, ink knives, binding needles, quills carved from bone. They began to circle me. But before they could start, something inside me snapped. A scream built in my throat, but it wasn't fear, it was memory. Because I remembered my story, who I was, and what Lorelei had taken. And I remembered the blank page at the start of my book. A page that hadn't been written yet. I tore the book open and scrawled across it in my own blood. "The archivist rewrites the ending." The store shuddered. Shelves toppled. Books burst into flame. The curators froze. Lorelei stumbled, clutching her head. "You can't..." But I wasn't listening, because I'd finally figured it out. The books were powerful because people believed in them. The stories only became real when someone read them. So what if I wrote a story they couldn't control? What if I ended it my way? I kept writing, each word carving itself into the air like fire. The codex is destroyed. The bindings undone. The store collapses in on itself. All stories are free. Lorelei screamed, tried to snatch the book from my hands. Too late. It caught fire. Black flames that didn't burn, but erased. One by one, the bound souls started to vanish. Not in pain, in peace, smiling, released. The curators crumbled into dust. The store groaned like something ancient dying for the first time. And then, Lorelei fell to her knees, her face flickering between hers and mine like a story losing its narrator. "Please," she whispered, "don't let me fade." I knelt beside her, held her hand, and wrote one last line. "Lorelei Finch lives." And then she was gone. Not dead, not erased, just released. The binding room caved in around me, shelves toppling, ink raining from the ceiling like blood from heaven. And in the center of the collapse, the codex, burning, shrieking, pages flying into the air like dying birds. Then nothing. Darkness, silence, and I woke up, back in my apartment, the sun pouring through the windows, everything untouched, no codex, no cursed books, just quiet. For the first time in weeks, I thought maybe it was a dream. Maybe the store never existed. But then I checked my desk, and there it was. One book, plain leather, no title. Just a single sentence written across the first page. "This story has ended." And beneath it, a second line forming slowly, like ink bleeding through from another world. But some pages never stay blank for long.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more horror tales. Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bump in the night. On tonight's episode, a man dealing with past trauma reflects on his encounter with an evil babysitter. So, no matter what you do, don't hire Mrs. Wren.
I've never liked telling this story, not because I'm scared people won't believe me, but because I'm scared they will. It happened when I was 10. My parents had finally decided to take a real vacation. One of those save-your-marriage trips to the Bahamas that involved rum, boat rides, and definitely not their only child. They left me with a babysitter. Her name was Mrs. Wren. The name sounds sweet, right? Like a children's book character. But even now, nearly 2 decades later, her name still makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I remember the first time I saw her. I was standing in the hallway, peeking between the balusters, while my mom opened the front door. And there she was, Mrs. Wren, mid-40s maybe. Tall, too tall, with wiry limbs and long gray hair, twisted into a braid that swung down her back like a rope. She wore this faded yellow cardigan and a wide-brimmed hat, even though it was nighttime. When she smiled, it looked wrong. Too many teeth, gums pale and tight, like a taxidermy smile. My mom said, "He's shy, but he's a good boy." And Mrs. Wren said, "I know. I've read all about him." That line stuck with me. Read all about me like I was home with her. Still, my parents left and she moved in. Her suitcase was huge. I remember that clearly. It looked old, worn leather with tarnished brass buckles. It thudded when she rolled it up the stairs. I remember wondering why it smelled like wet dirt and copper. That night, I tried not to talk to her. I ate my mac and cheese in silence. She sat across from me at the table watching, not eating, just smiling. "You're a very special boy," she said, "and I can see it. You've got the light in you. Most kids don't. They're shadows, empty, but not you." I didn't answer. She tapped her nails on the table. "You know, I used to be a nurse," she said, "in the special wards, places with locks on the outside. Have you ever been inside a locked room?" I said no. She smiled wider. "You will." That night, I locked my bedroom door. My parents never came back. I mean, they did eventually, but something happened in those 7 days that still haunts every moment of my adult life. Because on the second night, things started changing. I woke up to the sound of whispering, not coming from the hallway, from inside my closet. I thought I was dreaming at first, but when I turned over, I saw something that made my stomach knot up. Mrs. Wren, sitting in the rocking chair at the corner of my room, in the dark, rocking slowly and whispering into a doll's ear. It wasn't my doll. It was made of cloth and buttons, with its head tilted too far to the left. I asked her what she was doing. She said, "The doll doesn't sleep well unless I tell it bedtime stories." She stood up, walked to the closet, opened the door, and placed the doll inside. When she turned back to me, her face was blank. "No one leaves this room after dark," she said. "Not unless they want the man in the walls to find them." She shut the closet and left. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, I checked the closet. The doll was gone, no trace. But my closet smelled like dirt and rust. I tried calling my parents, no answer. Tried emailing, nothing. I even tried asking the neighbors if I could stay over. Mrs. Wren stopped me before I got to the edge of the driveway. She stood there, arms folded, eyes hard. "You're not allowed outside," she said. "The birds would see." The birds? What the hell was that supposed to mean? That day, she made me sit in the living room and read from a book I'd never seen before. It had no title, just a black leather cover with scratchy white symbols on it. She said it was important I learn the words. Every page was written in a language I didn't understand, but the letters made my eyes burn and my nose bleed. She made me read it out loud. Each time I did, I heard something moving in the walls, scraping, sniffing. Then one night, I broke the rule. I left my room after dark. I'd been hearing something in the hallway, not footsteps, creaking, like someone dragging a bag of meat across the floor. I opened my door just a crack and saw her, Mrs. Wren, kneeling in front of the attic door, drawing on the wall with her finger. Except the lines she was drawing weren't staying. They were glowing, pale green, pulsing, and her voice, it wasn't English. She was chanting. I backed away, heart pounding. And that's when I saw the doll again. It was sitting on the stairs, but it wasn't the same. It had hair now, my hair, and its button eyes had been replaced with something wet. Human. It had blinked. I ran back into my room and slammed the door. Locked it. Blocked it with a chair. I didn't sleep. In the morning, the doll was gone, and Mrs. Wren made pancakes, like nothing had happened. But I knew I had to get out. So I tried something else. I faked a stomach. Said I needed to go to the hospital. She didn't even blink. "Your parents said not to take you anywhere," she said. "They said you needed discipline." She gave me a glass of milk, told me to drink it. I pretended to. Poured it into the plant when she wasn't looking. The plant died instantly. I started hiding food, avoiding drinks, and that's when things got worse. She stopped talking, stopped smiling, but every night, the whispers came back. From the closet, from the vents, from under the bed. Sometimes I'd wake up with new scratches on my arms. Sometimes I'd find little bones under my pillow. But the worst was Thursday night. I was lying in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. And I heard my mom's voice, calling me from the hallway. "Sweetie, come here. It's time to go. We're back." I ran to the door, flung it open, and saw my mom standing there, smiling, but something was wrong. Her eyes were solid black, and her fingers were too long. When she stepped into the light, her skin melted off her face like wax. And underneath was Mrs. Wren, laughing. I slammed the door, screamed until I passed out. When I woke up, there were marks burned into the wall, symbols glowing. And in the corner of the room, a second doll. This one had my shirt on, and teeth, real human teeth. That was the breaking point. I decided to do something stupid. I waited until she went into the basement, which she always locked from the inside. Then I grabbed her giant leather suitcase. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it had answers. Maybe I thought it was her weakness. But the moment I opened it, I screamed. Inside were dozens of dolls, all hand-stitched, all lifelike, all whimpering. And each one had a tag tied around its neck with a name and an address and a birthday. One of them was mine. Another was my mom's. Another was a kid from my school who'd gone missing the year before. I dropped the suitcase, ran for the front door. Mrs. Wren was already standing there, not smiling anymore. Her face was gone, just skin pulled tight over muscle. No eyes, no nose, just teeth. Rows and rows of teeth. She opened her mouth wider than a person should be able to, and from inside it, I heard my mother's voice. "You'll never leave this house. When you see your babysitter's mouth open wider than humanly possible, and your mother's voice comes out of it, you stop thinking in words. You stop thinking altogether." I turned and ran, not toward the stairs, not toward my room, just away. But the house was wrong. The hallway stretched farther than it ever had before, like it was breathing, growing. Pictures on the walls no longer showed my family. They were blank now, or worse, moving. Smiling children with empty eyes stared out from behind glass. Some of them looked like me, and the whispers had gotten louder. They were calling my name, begging, crying. One of them whispered, "Don't let her stitch you too." I don't know how I made it to the laundry room. I slammed the door, locked it behind me, and jammed the ironing board against the handle. Then I collapsed on the floor, shaking. I wanted to scream, cry, break something, but I didn't, because I heard something. Scratching from inside the wall. No, not scratching, clawing. I backed up into the corner, and the wall started to pulse, like a heartbeat. Then, it cracked. A seam tore open along the drywall, and from it poured dolls, dozens of them, mouths sewn shut. Some were old, rotten, some were fresh. One still had a hospital bracelet. Another wore a cheerleading uniform I recognized from our local high school. They were twitching, crawling, trying to stand. One of them turned its head toward me and whispered, "Help us." That's when I saw the threads, black sticky strings running from their backs into the wall like marionette cords, controlling them, keeping them alive, or keeping them dead. I didn't think. I just grabbed the ironing board, swung it like a bat, and bashed open the tiny window above the dryer. The glass shattered. Cold night air rushed in. I didn't even hesitate. I squeezed through the opening, scraping my arms on the frame, and dropped onto the backyard grass. The wind hit me like a slap, and I ran down the street, barefoot, bleeding, sobbing. I ran straight to the old Miller house, 4 blocks over. They were the only neighbors I trusted. Mr. Miller answered the door in boxers and a wife beater, eyes wide. "Jesus, kid, what happened?" I tried to speak, but nothing came out. He pulled me inside, wrapped me in a blanket, and gave me cocoa. His wife called the police. I thought it was over. I thought I'd finally escaped, but I hadn't. Because when the police got there and we went back to my house, there was no Mrs. Wren, no suitcase, no dolls, no claw marks. My room was spotless, like I'd never lived there. Even the photo albums in the living room. My face had been cut out. My parents' voices were on the answering machine, but the messages were gone, wiped clean. The cops told Mr. Miller I was probably sleepwalking. Said I had an overactive imagination, but he didn't believe them. Not completely. Because when he tucked me into the guest bed, he said, "Whatever you saw, kid, it's not your fault." That night I dreamed of stitches, thread pulling through my skin, and something wet crawling into my ear. When I woke up, the window was open, and on the pillow next to me was a doll with my face and a note pinned to its chest. "You can't hide from family." I stayed with the Millers for the next few days. Social services got involved. They called my parents' resort but couldn't reach them. I tried to tell the social worker what had happened, but she smiled politely and said, "You just miss your mommy and daddy." Nobody believed me until the third night. That's when the birds came, dozens of them. Black wrens. They smashed into the windows, scratched at the doors. They weren't like normal birds. They had human eyes. One had a tooth growing out of its beak. Mr. Miller tried to beat them away with a broom, but they didn't stop until sunrise. The backyard looked like a horror movie. Feathers, blood, broken beaks. That's when I knew. She'd found me. Mrs. Wren wasn't going to stop, because she never left things unfinished. And I was her project. I begged the Millers to take me to the police again. They did. But this time, when I told them the story, every detail, They just nodded slowly and left me in a waiting room. An hour later, a woman with kind eyes sat down next to me, introduced herself as Dr. Halloran, child psychologist. She wanted to talk. I didn't, but she kept pushing. Asked me about the dolls, asked about Mrs. Wren's songs. I hadn't told her about the songs. She smiled. I've heard them too, she said. That's when I looked at her hands. Long fingers, too long, and a black thread looped around her pinky. She smiled wider. You've been reading from the book, haven't you? That language, it binds things, opens doors, the kind that don't close. I ran again, out of the station, into the street. Didn't care where. Ended up hiding in a dumpster behind a bowling alley, shaking, breathing in rot and grease. That's where someone found me. But it wasn't the police. It was a boy, maybe 16. Hair buzzed short. Leather jacket with a patch on the arm. An eye sewn shut with thorns around it. He offered me water. Said his name was Micah. And he knew who I was. You're the kid who saw her, he said. Wren. She's one of the old kind. Been around since before cities. She feeds on memory and family. She stitches you into her life. He showed me his back, covered in scars. Dozens of little X's. She had me for 3 years, he said, but I got out. I asked how. He said, you can't fight her, but you can undo her. Tear out the seams. You just need the right tools. He handed me a small knife. The blade was black, jagged, and the hilt was wrapped in doll hair. Cut the strings, he said. Then he was gone, just vanished into the alley. I went back to the house, my house, empty, quiet. The lights were off, but the attic light was glowing red through the vents. I stepped inside. Everything smelled like cinnamon and blood. The walls were covered in new wallpaper, stitched flesh. Pictures drawn in crayon. Me, Mrs. Wren, dolls, family. She was trying to replace my real family, rewrite my story. I climbed the stairs, one by one, knife in hand, and when I reached the attic door, it opened by itself. Inside Dash. Mrs. Wren was waiting, dressed like a bride. The veil of Wren's perched on her head. Her smile was back, too wide. She held something in her arms. It was my mother, or what was left of her, stitched from pieces, face too smooth, eyes too wide. I saved her for you, Mrs. Wren said. I sewed her just the way you like. I ran at her, knife raised. But the moment I crossed the threshold, the attic floor collapsed, and I fell into the dark, into screaming, into a pit filled with dolls. They reached, pulled me down, and the last thing I saw was Mrs. Wren's face, leaning over the edge, smiling and whispering, "Now you'll stay forever."
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more horror tales. Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bump in the night. On tonight's episode, a man dealing with past trauma reflects on his encounter with an evil babysitter. So, no matter what you do, don't hire Mrs. Wren.
You ever fall so far, you forget what the sky looks like? That's how deep the pit went. I wasn't falling through a house anymore. I was falling through her, through memories that weren't mine. I landed hard, on a floor that felt like cloth, breathing cloth. Everything was warm, too warm. The light was dim, flickering like a candle inside a throat. The walls, if you could call them that, were layers of stitched skin, doll parts, broken toys, and glass eyes blinking out of sync. I couldn't move for a while, just lay there, listening, not to silence, but something worse. Lullabies from every direction, dozens of versions of Mrs. Wren's voice singing different songs, some in English, some in tongues that made my ears ring, and beneath them, tiny wet whispers, children crying, begging, praying. I stood gripping the knife Micah had given me and stepped forward. My feet sank into the floor with every step. Thread snapped around my ankles. Teeth brushed my calves. It wasn't a basement. It wasn't even a room. It was a womb. She was growing something, a family, me. But not the real me, stitched me. I saw it slumped in the corner, a puppet with my face. Same haircut, same scar on my eyebrow. Only its eyes were wide open, watching me. "She's almost done," it said, voice trembling. "When the last stitch goes in, you'll forget. And I'll wake up." I asked what it meant, just started laughing. Crying, then a snap. Its head twisted clean off. A red thread yanked it into the ceiling, and it was gone. I ran, down corridors lined with cribs and shelves of baby tea. I ran through a hallway made of picture frames, each one showing a different version of me. In one, I was smiling. In another, I was screaming. In one, I was completely hollowed out, a black thread where my spine should have been. And then I saw her. Mrs. Wren standing at a table, sewing. My parents were on the table, unconscious, but breathing. And she was stitching their hands together, threading them into a giant, twisted family quilt. Her mouth never moved, but I heard her voice inside my head. "You were such a lonely boy. Now you'll have so many brothers, so many sisters, forever and ever and ever." I raised the knife, charged her. But she turned too fast, inhumanly fast. Claws lashed out and caught my arm. I fell. The knife skidded away into the dark. She was on top of me in seconds, black thread leaking from her eyes, mouth stretched open like a broken doll. "You should never have run," she hissed. "You broke our trust." I spit in her face and she smiled and sewed my mouth shut. I don't remember what happened next, just pain and fire and whispers. When I woke up again, I wasn't in the pit. I was back in my room, clean, safe, sunlight streaming through the window, the smell of waffles downstairs. For a second, I thought it had all been a dream, until I sat up and saw the mirror. The reflection blinked out of sync. The me in the mirror wasn't me. Its smile was too wide, too happy. And then it whispered, "I got out." My heart dropped. I turned to the door, and there stood Mrs. Wren, holding a plate of waffles, wearing my mom's apron. "Morning, sunshine," she chirped. "Ready for your big day?" I tried to scream, but my mouth was still stitched shut. She set the plate down, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "Try to behave, or I'll have to unmake you again." She walked out. I sat frozen, shaking, tears running down my face. Then I noticed something. In the waffle, tiny letters, formed from syrup. "Micah's alive. Look in the vent." I crawled to the floor vent under my desk, pulled it open with my fingernails. Inside was a torn notebook and a pair of scissors, rusty but real. I didn't hesitate. I sliced the stitches holding my mouth. Blood poured down my chin, but I could speak again. And inside the notebook were instructions, maps, names, symbols. Micah had been planning a war against them, the babysitters, not just Mrs. Wren, but dozens of them, all part of something older, something buried in small towns and lullabies, feeding off broken families. Micah called them the threaded ones. And there was one rule: never let them finish the pattern. That's how they lock you in, how they rewrite your life, how they turn you into them. I had to act fast, had to finish what Micah started, before she stitched me out of my own life. That night I waited, pretended to sleep, listened to her breathing through the walls. At exactly 3:03 a.m., she came into my room, humming, dragging the thread. She stood over me, raising her needle. That's when I lunged, scissors in hand. I stabbed her right in the eye. She screamed, not in pain, but in rage, like a chorus of 1,000 angry mothers. The walls pulsed. The house shook. She swiped at me, ripping open my shoulder, but I ran. Down the stairs, into the kitchen, where I'd prepared a trap. Micah's notebook had instructions for an unbinding ritual. Circle of broken toys, a mirror, fire, and truth. I stood in the center, bleeding, screaming her name backward, and she came. Not just Mrs. Wren, but all of them. Dozens of threaded ones. Faces like stitched porcelain. Smiles that went too wide. They surrounded me, singing, but I finished the chant, lit the fire, and for the first time, I saw them burn. Thread snapping, flesh unraveling, memories unwinding. Mrs. Wren tried to reach me, tried to pull me into her arms, but I stabbed her again. right through the chest. The blade broke. She didn't scream. She just whispered, "You'll always be mine." Then she was gone, and the others with her. The house empty, still, silent. I collapsed, and everything went dark. When I woke up, I was in a hospital, bandaged, alone. The nurses told me I was found passed out in a burned-out house. No one else inside, no evidence of dolls, or sewing, or monsters, but they were wrong, because when they brought me my belongings, there was something in my hoodie pocket, a note, written in Micah's handwriting. One left, the mother of Thread. She's waking up. We need you. And attached to it was another doll wearing my clothes, with one eye missing and its mouth sewn shut. You can survive hell, but you don't leave it behind. Not really. I carried it with me after the hospital, in the scabs along my arm where the stitches had been, in the way every shadow looked like it had teeth, and in the whisper that returned every night when I closed my eyes, "She's not gone." Micah's note wouldn't leave my mind either. One left, the mother of Thread. She's waking up. We need you. I didn't know what it meant at first, not really, but deep down I could feel it. Mrs. Wren was just a fragment, a splinter, a puppet herself. Something older had been pulling her strings. And that something was still out there, still watching, still waiting. It didn't take long before I started noticing them again. Threaded ones. They were subtler now, posing as teachers, librarians, social workers, all smiles and warm cookies. But behind their eyes, black thread shimmered. They weren't looking for me anymore. They were looking for kids, building a new family with a network. I started following them, tracking them. Micah and I weren't the only ones anymore. There were others, survivors, kids like me who'd escaped but hadn't forgotten. We met in abandoned buildings, shared maps, traded tools, knives made from mirror shards, salt bullets, chalk made from bone dust. We called ourselves the Unsown. We had one goal: find the mother of Thread and cut her from the world. We found her name first, scrawled into the spine of an old picture book in a condemned daycare center. Tavella. The syllables made us bleed when we spoke them. Micah said the name was older than language. A god, maybe. Or something worse. Not just the mother of the threaded ones, but the pattern itself. She didn't move. The world moved through her. And she was waking up. Every threaded one that sewed a child into their false family brought her closer, and we were running out of time. That's when the dreams started. Not nightmares, invitations, stitched cards appearing under pillows, drawings on the backs of our eyelids, calling us to her nursery, calling us home. One by one, we started vanishing. Micah was the last to go before me. He left a voicemail on a burner phone before he disappeared. She's not in one place anymore. She's everywhere. You can't fight her from the outside. You have to go in. You have to be unmade. That was the last I ever heard his voice. So I let myself be taken. I opened the last letter, read the pattern aloud, and fell asleep. When I woke up, I wasn't in my bed. I was back in my childhood living room. But not quite. Too quiet, too clean. My parents were on the couch, unmoving, faces blank. A mobile spun above the coffee table, made from teeth and doll parts. And there, in the hallway, stood her, the mother of Thread. She didn't look terrifying at first. She looked ordinary. A tall woman with silver hair and a face like an old porcelain doll. Cracked, but kind. She smiled. "Welcome back, sweetheart," she whispered. But the walls behind her moved, twitched, writhed. Threads ran from her fingers to the ceiling, the furniture, the sky. She was the house. She was the pattern. Every floorboard, every memory, every lullaby. I could see them now for what they were. Stitches. And I was inside the quilt, my entire life. A thread in her tapestry. I tried to run, but the floor melted into yarn beneath my feet. Hands reached out from the wallpaper. Children, crying, trapped. "I made you better," she cooed. "You were broken, alone. I gave you family." "You took them," I snarled. "You replaced them." "No," she whispered, stepping closer. "I perfected them." The threads wrapped around my chest, squeezed, pulled. I could feel myself unraveling, my thoughts slipping, names blurring. Who was I? What was my name? What was real? Then I remembered the scissors. Micah's blade. I reached into my jacket and pulled it free. She saw it and screamed. Not in pain, but in rage. The illusion shattered. Walls cracked open. Reality peeled back like old wallpaper. I saw what she really was. A pulsing mass of mouths and threads and eyes and claws. A mother of monsters. She lunged. I slashed. I cut the threads between us and screamed my name again and again until the world started to shake. Until her threads began snapping. Until the children in the walls began to sing. A lullaby, but backwards. Unbinding her, undoing the pattern. The sky above her shattered like glass, and her last words were a hiss of thread through teeth. There are always more patterns. Then she was gone. I woke up in a field, burned, bleeding, surrounded by dolls with broken strings. Micah was there, somehow, alive, barely. He helped me up, said, "You did it." I asked if it was really over. He didn't answer, just handed me a box. Inside was a single spool of black thread. Still warm, still breathing. I asked him what we do with it. He said, "We guard it, we wait. And if it ever starts to move..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to, because the thread twitched.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more horror tales.